We think of our world as fully mapped, fully conquered, and fully understood. We walk along concrete streets. We look out over calm blue coastlines, and we look up at the sky, believing that we are the masters of this planet. But humanity only occupies a tiny, thin skin of dry land. 70% of the earth is covered in absolute, crushing darkness. We have sent hundreds of people into outer space, but we have sent fewer than a dozen into the deepest abyss on our own planet, the Challenger Deep, a scar in the Earth's crust 7 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. The public believes the deep ocean is a silent, barren desert of freezing water, inhabited only by pale, blind shrimp and fragile, translucent fish. They believe the only danger down there is the immense atmospheric pressure, over 8 tons of force per square inch, enough to instantly crush a human body into a red paste. But the silence of the abyss is a manufactured illusion. My name is David Mitchell. In 2012, I worked as a heavy tonnage acoustics engineer for the United States Navy's Subsurface Warfare Division. My team was stationed aboard a covert research vessel floating directly over the Mariana Trench. To the outside world, we were conducting a routine bathymetric mapping survey using deep-tow sonar arrays. But our real mission was classified under the codename Project Challenger. The Navy didn't care about mapping the seafloor. 3 months prior, a highly classified nuclear submarine patrolling the Western Pacific had picked up a low-frequency acoustic signature originating from the absolute bottom of the trench. It wasn't the sound of an underwater volcanic eruption, and it wasn't the call of a blue whale. It was a rhythmic, artificial pattern, a broadcast. My job was to deploy specialized hydroacoustic listening arrays, reinforced titanium cylinders filled with sensitive piezoelectric microphones, down into the black expanse of the abyss to capture the signal. We were told to study the sound. We were told to decrypt it. But when we finally pulled the arrays back up from the black, we didn't just find an audio file. We found a door that had been unbolted. And what came through that door is the reason why the U.S. Navy has quietly designated a permanent, heavily militarized exclusion zone around the Mariana Trench, ordering warships to fire upon any civilian vessel that dares to drop an anchor. The text that follows is the unredacted transcript of my personal logs and the audio data retrieved from the bottom of the world. Put on your headphones, turn out your lights, because the ocean isn't filled with water. It is filled with teeth. According to my grandfather's old Navy journals, the true horror of the ocean begins when you cross the 5,000-meter mark. At that depth, the sunlight is completely gone. The water temperature drops to just above freezing. The pressure is already immense enough to implode standard military submarines like empty soda cans. But at 36,000 feet, inside the Challenger Deep, the rules of biology and physics begin to fracture. On June 14, 2012, at exactly 3 in the morning, we lowered our primary hydrophone array, the Model 9 titanium acoustic collector, to the absolute floor of the trench. The winch cables groaned under the immense weight of 7 miles of steel line. It took nearly 4 hours for the sensor package to hit the silt floor. I sat in the dark acoustics lab of the ship, the glowing green monitors reflecting off my eyes. I put on my studio headphones and opened the raw data stream. At first, the audio was standard abyssal white noise. The low, muffled, crushing roar of shifting underwater currents. The faint, metallic clicking of the hydrophone's internal battery relays. It was a cold, lonely, mechanical frequency. Then the water pressure sensors on the array began to spike. But the pressure wasn't increasing from the weight of the water above. The telemetry showed a massive, localized thermal plume blooming directly beneath the hydrophone. The water temperature at the bottom of the trench, which should have been a freezing 34 degrees, instantly shot up to over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The water was boiling at the bottom of the sea. On the audio feed, the low roar of the current suddenly vanished, replaced by a sound that made my skin turn to ice. It was a wet, heavy, rhythmic tearing sound. Squeak, tear, squelch. It sounded exactly like someone dragging a rusted iron hook through thick, wet leather. The microphones picked up a deep, subaudible vibration that shook the metal walls of our research vessel 7 miles above. Then came the voice. It didn't use sound waves traveling through water. The entity was vibrating the thick titanium casing of the hydrophone itself, using our own electronic equipment as a vocal cord to speak directly into the digital recorders. The voice was a shifting, layered mosaic of frequencies. It sounded like hundreds of drowning people, all screaming the exact same words in perfect, robotic unison, their throats clogged with thick ocean brine. It spoke a dialect of a language that didn't match any known human civilization, an ancient, guttural frequency that made my teeth ache through the headphones. I ran the signal through our decryption software, isolating the vocal track from the boiling static. The translation grid slowly filled the monitor screen with words. The voice said, "The needle has pierced the skin of the floor. The abyss is breathing now. We taste your iron on the wire. We are climbing the string to see the surface." The audio levels spiked into the red so violently that the digital audio workspace crashed completely, leaving my headphones ringing with a sharp, painful tone of static. I ripped the headset off, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps, a cold sweat breaking out across my chest. The captain immediately ordered the crew to activate the high-speed winch and pull the hydrophone array back to the surface. The steel cable reeled in for 5 agonizing hours. When the titanium collector finally broke the surface of the water and was hoisted onto the deck of the ship, the entire crew went dead silent. The heavy titanium cylinder wasn't dented or crushed by the water pressure. It had been dissolved. The reinforced metal housing was covered in a thick, dripping, toxic green biological slime that reeked of rotten sulfur and decaying flesh. The metal was pitted and scarred, as if it had been digested inside a massive stomach, and wrapped around the remaining steel frame of the array was a fragment of something organic. It was a translucent, pale white strand of skin, over 12 feet long, covered in rows of tiny, needle-like human teeth. The skin was still pulsing, visibly contracting and expanding on the wet deck of the ship, trying to breathe the surface air. The captain didn't hesitate. He ordered the security team to incinerate the array with high-temperature thermite charges, burning the organic material into ash before dumping the remains back into the ocean. We were forced to sign top-secret non-disclosure agreements under threat of immediate military court-martial and permanent imprisonment. They told us it was an underwater chemical pocket. They told us the audio was an echo anomaly, but they were lying. 2 months later, the Navy deployed an unmanned, heavily armored deep-sea camera capsule called the Bathyes 1. It was equipped with high-intensity halogen floodlights, dual high-definition cameras, and a direct fiber-optic video line to the ship. They wanted to see what was opening up at the bottom of the world. I sat in the corner of the command center, watching the monitor screen. The video feed was grainy, distorted by the immense electromagnetic static radiating from the trench floor. The camera drifted down past 9,000 meters, cutting through a thick, milky white fog of marine snow and sulfur gas. Then the camera breached the floor of the Challenger Deep. The halogen lights cut through the black void, illuminating the topography of the subterranean abyss. The geologists in the room gasped. The captain dropped his coffee cup, the ceramic shattering on the steel floor. The bottom of the Mariana Trench wasn't rock. It wasn't silt or volcanic basalt. The lights revealed a colossal, miles-wide structural rift in the Earth's crust, and the interior of that rift was lined with rows of dark, pulsing red muscular tissue and massive, calcified bone structures that formed a giant, jagged ribcage stretching deep into the mantle of the Earth. The entire trench was an open mouth, a continent-sized biological entity buried alive beneath the ocean floor, waking up after millions of years of stagnation. As the camera capsule descended deeper into the fleshy rift, the halogen lights illuminated something crawling up the side of the organic wall. It was a hand, but it wasn't human. It was a massive, pale, multi-jointed appendage made of twisted muscle fibers and hundreds of fused human skulls, stretching over 40 feet wide. It didn't have skin. It was raw, bleeding meat, clawing its way up the trench wall with a sickening, frantic speed. It was climbing the camera cable. It was pulling itself toward our ship. At that exact second, the audio speakers in the command center burst into life with a deafening, high-pitched screeching wail. It wasn't static. It was the sound of thousands of human voices screaming in unison, a chorus of pure, unadulterated agony that rattled the metal light fixtures on the ceiling. And then the screen went to absolute black static. The ship was suddenly rocked by a massive underwater shockwave. The ocean beneath us began to boil, thick plumes of black mud and white sulfur gas erupting around the hull of our vessel. The ship listed violently to the port side, the alarms blaring as the hull plates groaned under an unnatural, upward physical force. Something was lifting the ship from below. The captain ordered an immediate emergency evacuation of the coordinates, engaging the ship's massive diesel engines at maximum throttle to flee the area. The Navy officially closed Project Challenger the following week. They sealed the files, welded the data drives inside lead-lined boxes, and decommissioned our research vessel. They placed a permanent naval blockade around the coordinates of the Mariana Trench, deploying nuclear submarines and destroyers to patrol the waters 24/7, keeping the world away from the mouth that is opening at the bottom of the sea. I left the service that year. I live in the high desert now, thousands of miles away from the coast, in a dry, barren landscape where there is no water, no moisture, and no waves. I don't go near swimming pools, lakes, or rivers. I don't even like to look at rain, because last night, a massive storm rolled across the desert. The downpour was heavy, water pooling against the glass of my living room window. And as the water ran down the glass, forming a thick, clear sheet, the liquid didn't make a splattering sound. It began to hum, a low, rhythmic vibration that made my teeth ache inside my jaw. I put my ear against the wet glass of the window, and through the sound of the rain, I heard a wet, raspy whisper calling out my name from the dark clouds above. "David," the whisper said, a cold, drowning rasp that made my blood instantly turn to ice. "The needle is broken, but the mouth is wide open now. We are swimming up the rain. Humanity has spent centuries exploring the surface of the ocean, believing that we are safe as long as we stay on top of the water. But we didn't realize that the ocean isn't a body of water. It is a biological fluid, a thick, amniotic soup keeping something unimaginable alive beneath our feet. The blockade is still patrolling the trench, but you cannot blockade the clouds. You cannot stop the rain. Next time you hear a storm rattling your windows at night, don't look too closely at the water running down the glass, because down there in the dark, where the pressure is absolute, the garden has woken up, and it is looking for fresh meat to drag down into the deep.